Welcome to the Gastro Girl Podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Garland.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Gastro Girl Podcast, where we bring you expert insights, patient stories, and the latest in digestive health. I'm your host, Jacqueline Garland, and today we're diving into a topic that's urgent and deeply personal to our guest, early-onset colorectal cancer. Joining me today is Dr. George Beauregard, a Massachusetts-based internal medicine physician, healthcare executive, and advocate for early cancer detection. His mission became profoundly personal in 2017 when his 29-year-old son, Patrick, was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer, literally just a month after his wedding. Despite a courageous battle and groundbreaking advocacy work, Patrick passed away at the age of 32. Since then, Dr. Beauregard has dedicated himself to raising awareness about the alarming rise in early-onset colorectal cancer and the critical need for improved screening, research, and diagnostic tools. He's also releasing a memoir about his journey, blending personal experience with medical insight. Now, Patrick was treated at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, and that is where our previous guest, Dr. Kimmy Ng, is from, and she was our special guest on a previous episode that we did in December on young-onset colorectal cancer and metastatic cancer. So we hope you'll listen to that episode, as it really does a great job of explaining what young-onset colorectal cancer is, the alarming rate of increase, and risk factors. So I encourage you to check out that episode. Dr. Beauregard, thank you so much for joining us today and your willingness to share your story about your son, Patrick. We're so grateful that you're able to be with us today to share this important story. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jackie, for having me on.
You're so welcome. So your career in medicine spans decades, but your journey with early onset colorectal cancer became deeply personal in 2017. Can you share your son Patrick's story and what those first signs were that led to his diagnosis?
Sure. So my son Patrick was 29 years old at the time, very physically fit, had a very health-conscious diet, an ex-Marine. I was working in Idaho at the time. We kept our home in Massachusetts, and he texted me one day in the middle of the afternoon, which was very unusual for him, and just asked me to call him when I had a minute. And so that sort of, my spidey sense went off a bit, and I called him, and I was immediately concerned about how he sounded and the pace of how he was talking. And he was describing that he had over the last 24 hours or so, some pretty intense abdominal pain that was sporadic. And he described that, it would almost buckle him to his knees. And then he had some nausea and vomiting. And I asked him, okay, well, how are you? I asked him a bunch of typical red flag questions. Is there blood in your stool? Or is there blood in what you're throwing up? Do you have a high fever? Et cetera, et cetera. And he said no to most of those alarm symptom questions. So he had been on his honeymoon to Tahiti and Bora Bora a month previously. So part of me thought, it could be a viral infection, norovirus or something like that. Or maybe something a little more exotic, given where he had traveled, although I couldn't exactly remember what was endemic to those areas. But, infectious cause was my leading thought at the time. So I told him, take a couple of Tylenol, take some rest, and, call me in a couple of hours, let me know how you're doing. So he said, fine. And I called my wife, Kathy, and alerted her to what was going on. She was back in Massachusetts. And she called him, and he was in the middle of another intense pain episode. So she advised him to go to Tufts Medical Center, which wasn't far from where he was living in an apartment. So he was able to get there, and they evaluated him. The blood work and plain x-rays really didn't reveal anything of concern. His symptoms got better with medication, and they were just getting ready to discharge him when he had another wave of intense pain and nausea and vomiting. So at that point, they canceled the discharge and they said, okay, we're going to do an abdominal CAT scan. And the CAT scan showed that he had an obstruction.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
Possibly a mass. So Kathy called me. And, again, I was quite surprised by that. So the next morning, he underwent a flexible sigmoidoscopy. And the gastroenterologist spoke to my wife and Patrick's wife, Amanda, first, and gave them the news that what he saw in Patrick's sigmoid colon more than likely was a cancerous mass. And then Kathy asked him to speak to me.
Oh, my God.
And, one of the alarming descriptions of colon cancer that narrows the lumen of the large intestine, it's called an apple core lesion.
Okay.
And those were the exact words that this doctor said to me. Your son has an apple core lesion. And I was like shocked. And I couldn't believe it, but I had to believe it. And,
right.
I was on a plane back to Boston, early the next morning. So I got there, went immediately to Tufts Medical Center. Kathy was there. Patrick's wife, Amanda, was there. And I had just arrived within like 5 minutes, and there was a knock at the door, and a surgeon came in and said that he wanted to talk to Patrick, first. So he asked us to leave the room. And then when we came back in, Patrick was crying, which not like Patrick at all. This is, again, an ex-Marine. And the surgeon told us that they had done a CAT scan of his chest, part of the routine staging, exercise that gets done. And the CAT scan showed he had multiple nodules in both lungs. So he had evidence that was strongly suggestive that he had stage 4 disease, which has a 15% relative 5-year survival rate. I mean, that's how all this started. Patrick was very healthy. I asked him a few times about any premonitory symptoms or warnings. None whatsoever. And that's not uncommon. My daughter described it in an essay that she wrote. Our world went from a rom-com to a tragedy, like, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you just had the wedding, right? Didn't you get married
He was married a month before.
It's so heartbreaking.
And Jackie, to this day, when I see those pictures come up on our Aura, I'm still looking at him in disbelief that the cancer was already there, and it had probably been growing over 10 years since he was in his mid to late teens.
Oh, geez.
Just shocking.
How long, I know it was a heartbreaking journey, but what happened after when he was diagnosed? Did he have treatment? And then, what, we know that unfortunately he passed away, but what, how much time did he have and all of that with your family?
Well, the immediate thing to do, the gastroenterologist stented the narrowing in his colon to relieve the symptoms of the obstruction, but the stent could only stay in a few days. So the surgeon recommended that he have surgery to remove the mass, and he felt pretty confident that he could reanastomose the 2 segments so that he wouldn't have a colostomy bag. He felt pretty confident that he could do that. So a couple of days later, on the first month anniversary of their wedding, Patrick underwent the surgery, which was successful in removing that section of his large intestine and, reattaching the 2 ends. So that took care of the surgical piece to it. But then we had to get, a medical oncologist, pretty quickly.
Because it metastasized.
Yes.
And this is what happens with young onset colon cancer. A lot of times the signs and symptoms aren't there. And by the time it is found in your son Patrick's case, it's already metastasized to other parts of the body, which is the sad and unfortunate part of all of this.
Right. And I think the other thing is that even at times when there are some common signs, the common signs are dismissed by the person and or by a medical professional that they go to, and they say, well, you're very young and healthy. This is nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it. And I think that dynamic needs to change, obviously, given what's occurring.
So, and not only are you dealing with the grief of a son, but you're also a physician in this case too. So how did you navigate the emotional and medical complexities of this disease? And what was that experience like? And, how would you describe that?
Well, Jackie, fatherhood and medicine are ingrained in my identity. First and foremost, I had to be his father. I myself had an early onset cancer. When I was 49, I had bladder cancer, advanced stage. That typically happens in men in their 70s. So I went through a chemotherapy, surgery, side effects, complications, thing, back in 2005, that my kids were also part of the, they were in the environment of that and watching me go through it. So I could draw from my experience to try to help him as much as possible, but I had to provide emotional support and whatever I could do. And as a physician, I could bring my own personal experience, my professional experience, my ability to scour the medical literature about this and learn about advances in chemotherapy, et cetera, et cetera. So I played both roles.
Yeah. And what do you, from that experience, and we're talking about it now, like what do you wish more people, both on the patient side and providers, understood about early onset colorectal cancer?
Well, I think, Jackie, it now has to appear on your list of potential diagnoses. It can no longer be not considered or not put on the list in a young adult with some common symptoms and be dismissed by the patient. So I'm trying to tell people, don't dismiss these symptoms. This could be something serious. And to providers, don't dismiss the symptoms in a young, otherwise healthy person, because, we have evidence that this rate of early onset cancers, specifically colorectal cancer, is persistently rising 2% a year, globally. And the indications are that, it's going to become a large portion of cancers, in adults under 50 years old within a few years. In men, it's already become the number one cancer in men under 50. And in women, it's gone from number 4 to number 2. It trails only breast cancer. And it's not inconceivable to think that it will supplant breast cancer as the number one in women under 50.
Wow. And, I have to ask this, and this is, again, such an important topic, is the aspect of family history. Like, you had a history of cancer. What do you want people to know about, doing, when they go to the doctor? A lot of times we have those forms and we just kind of go down the list. Half the time we don't even know, or we don't think about that our family's history impacts us. What can you share with our listeners about the importance of family history?
Well, family history obviously is very important. I think the genetic predispositions to cancer, for colon cancer, are well known. Gardner syndrome and juvenile polyposis and things like that, although they constitute a small percent of actual colorectal cancer cases. So, people need to know that. And I think the issue here that's tricky is that, cancer screening, colon cancer screening, starts at 45, but people just need to have a heightened awareness of these GI symptoms, because even having just one of the 4 common signs increases your risk twofold. Having all 4 of the common signs increases it 6-fold.
Well, I was going to ask you this later, but since you mentioned it, what are those signs and symptoms that people should be aware of?
So obviously abdominal pain, diarrhea, blood in the stool, and iron deficiency anemia. So if you're a young, otherwise healthy adult, you're found to have iron deficiency anemia, that is a definite potential cause for it.
So a lot of us may not know that we're iron deficient. What are some of the signs and symptoms that you could possibly be iron deficient and have anemia before you ask the doctor for that test? Like, what would would they be tired? Would they,
Yeah, I think if your blood count falls to a certain level, you are going to feel increasingly fatigued. You may even feel a little more short of breath with exertion that you weren't experiencing before. You might start looking pale, especially the inside of your eyelids. This conjunctival pallor, it's called. So those are some signs that, perhaps your blood count is, on the low side.
You've written a memoir about your journey, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we can expect from reading your memoir and what inspired you to write it and what you hope your readers can take away from your story.
Sure. So thank you for asking that, Jackie. So writing is one of the ways that I express myself the best. And when Patrick was diagnosed, I was, like having a child with cancer diagnosis is a parent's nightmare. So I was overwhelmed, and I started writing about it, journaling about it, so I could try to help myself deal with it better, put it in the proper pieces over here and other pieces over here. So that was sort of how I sort of normally, do things. I respond with writing. And I also had my own cancer experience, which I had all the notes, the consult notes, the operative notes, the chemo notes. I had all that stuff on hand. And it struck me as a bit unusual that, here's a physician father who had an early onset cancer, and now one of my sons. This is a little bit of an unusual circumstance. But when I started writing, I believed that Patrick was going to be a survivor. So I started journaling in Storyworth, which my daughter had gifted me. And I believed that it would be a family story of two survivors, father and son, that could get passed down over generations. And that was my original intent.
Yes.
When the scientific journals started talking more about early onset cancers and the global rise and that whole phenomenon, I thought to myself, there's a bigger piece to this. And I felt that one of the things I could do was I could help try to raise awareness of this, and at the same time provide a very personal and moving story about, my son and our family and what we went through and how we did it. And maybe to be a compass and a roadmap for people similarly affected.
Right.
Every cancer journey is unique, and it does involve all the members of the family. And it's a very, very difficult experience. And obviously, I wished our story had ended better, but, it is what it is. And I think there's merit to telling the story and having people know, because Patrick he had an amazing response to his diagnosis. He became a very public advocate, was on the Today Show, gave speeches and talks, and while staring down the barrel of his diagnosis. It was very inspiring.
Oh, I'm sure it's obviously a heartbreaking story, but it's a powerful one of inspiration and hope for others who may be in a similar situation. What is the title of your memoir?
The title is Reservations For Nine. It's based on an essay that my daughter wrote in college of the same name. And she was writing about our family experience, when Patrick got diagnosed and how it affected our family. And one of the things that we used to enjoy the most were family dinners with my oldest son and his wife, Patrick and Amanda, with Kaylin and her husband, and then my youngest son and my wife and I. So it was Reservations For Nine at some, local restaurant or the nice restaurant. And that's where I got the title from the book.
That's beautiful. Writing is such a gift, not only to the person who's writing, but to the people that get to read those beautiful words. So I thank you for doing that, and I'm inspired by hearing that very much. Before you go, Dr. Beauregard, I want to make sure our listeners, especially younger adults, walk away with clear, actionable insights from today's episode. So if someone out there is experiencing symptoms but isn't sure whether they should be ignored, again, I'm going to reiterate because this is so important. What are the key warning signs they should never, ever ignore?
So that would be diarrhea, blood in the stool. Don't assume it's from hemorrhoids, abdominal pain. And again, if you are found to be anemic. So if you're more tired, short of breath with exertion, your skin's starting to look a little pale, do not ignore those symptoms. So seek medical evaluation. And if you go get medical evaluation and you get told you're young and healthy, you don't need to worry about this, you need to push harder. And if that provider doesn't, I'm trying to find the right word here, order some sort of evaluation, then you need to find a different provider. Because
Absolutely.
that's what they need to do.
Yeah, we always advocate for the patients. And if you're not satisfied or happy with the care that you received, and sometimes it's always in our gut, we always feel something might be wrong. You have to be your own best advocate. And I just wanted to add about the diarrhea. Also, it could be other changes in bowel habits, like constipation, narrowing of stools, unexplained weight loss.
Yes.
So there's all those things. And if you feel something's wrong, trust your gut, right? Trust your gut.
Yeah, and you have to push hard. Because again, you might get told nothing to worry about. You can't accept that answer.
Well, thank you so much for breaking down these tips so clearly. And raising awareness is key. And for our listeners, if you or someone you know has these symptoms, please do not wait to get medical attention. Talk to your doctor. And if you feel dismissed, like Dr. Beauregard says, please, please, please keep pushing for answers. Right? Early detection saves lives, especially when it comes to colorectal cancer. If that is detected early, the polyp can be removed, and hopefully everything will be okay.
Yes.
In closing, Dr. Beauregard, your story is, as I said, is heartbreaking, but it's also your advocacy, and it's also very inspiring. And I thank you for sharing Patrick's legacy with us and for pushing forward the conversation about early onset colorectal cancer. And again, for those of you who are listening, if you or someone you know is experiencing persistent symptoms, rectal bleeding, changes in bowel habits, unexplained anemia, please don't ignore them. Push for answers and seek medical care. To learn more about early onset colorectal cancer, emerging technologies, and how you can advocate for change, please visit the gastrogirl.com website. Check out our new app, Ask Gastro Girl, where you can download from the Google Play or App Store. It's AI-powered, all evidence-based, so it answers your most common questions. And as always, please remember to follow Gastro Girl for the latest expert insights in digestive health. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Gastro Girl podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.